I trusted him. "You're safe with me," he said. But I couldn't shake it. So I did something first. And the second I sent that text, I realized he never betrayed me, but I already did. I keep coming back to that moment. Not the night itself. Not even what I did after. Just that quiet second where everything still looked normal on the outside, and I knew I had already crossed something I couldn't uncross. Kevin still doesn't know. We met through Emily at her apartment in Denver. It wasn't even supposed to be a real gathering, just a few people, drinks, background music, nothing memorable. I almost didn't go. Work had been draining, and I had spreadsheets open on my laptop that I told myself were more important than socializing. Emily didn't let me stay home. She said, "You need to meet someone who isn't a walking red flag." I told her I didn't have the energy for another disappointment. She said, "Then meet someone boring for once." Kevin was already there when I arrived. He wasn't loud. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was sitting on the arm of the couch, talking to someone about a building project, explaining something about structure and load without sounding like he needed to prove anything. At some point, Emily dragged me over and said, "Kevin, this is Laura. She pretends she hates people, but she's actually just picky." I said, "That's not better." Kevin smiled a little and said, "Picky sounds efficient." That was the first thing I noticed. He didn't try to charm me. He just responded like everything was simple. We ended up talking for most of the night. Nothing intense. No deep confessions. Just normal conversation that didn't feel forced. When I said I worked in accounting, he didn't make a joke about taxes or boredom. He just asked, "Do you like it?" I said, "I like that it makes sense." He nodded like that was enough. Before I left, he said, "I'd like to see you again." No pressure. No performance. Just clear. I said yes before I could overthink it. That should have been a good sign. The first few weeks were easy. We got coffee, walked around the city, had quiet dinners where conversation didn't feel like work. He remembered small things. What I liked to drink. How I took my coffee. The fact that I hated being late for anything. It felt stable. And that's when the problem started. I don't do well with stable. Every relationship I've had before Kevin followed the same pattern. It starts good. Not even great. Just comfortable. Then something shifts. Messages slow down. Plans get vague. You feel it before you see it. And then eventually, there's someone else. There's always someone else. So when things with Kevin didn't shift, when he stayed consistent instead of pulling away, my brain didn't relax. It started looking for reasons. If he replied a little later than usual, I noticed. If he mentioned a coworker, even casually, I remembered it longer than I should have. If he made plans for the next week, part of me wondered if he was just keeping options open. None of it made sense. He never hid his phone. Never disappeared. Never gave me anything real to question. But the feeling didn't go away. One night, we were out at a bar downtown. It wasn't crowded, just enough noise to feel alive. We were sitting close, talking about something small, I don't even remember what. He got a call and stepped outside to take it. I watched him through the window. He was smiling, laughing at something the person on the other end said. I couldn't hear a word, but my brain filled in everything anyway. She's funnier than you. She gets a version of him you don't. He's already halfway out, you just don't see it yet. By the time he came back inside, I had already decided something was wrong. He sat down and said, "Sorry, that was work." I nodded like it made sense, but I was already pulling back. He noticed. Of course he did. "What's wrong?" he asked. I said, "Nothing. Just tired." He watched me for a second, like he was deciding whether to push it. Then he said, "Okay, we can head out if you want." No accusation. No frustration. Just consideration. That should have reassured me. Instead, it felt like distance. Like he didn't care enough to dig deeper. Which didn't make sense, but it felt real in the moment. That's the part one never knew how to explain. It wasn't about what he did. It was about what I expected him to do based on everything that came before him. I didn't talk to him about it. I didn't want to sound paranoid. Or insecure. Or like I was dragging old problems into something that hadn't even broken yet. So I kept it to myself. And it kept growing. Weeks passed. He stayed the same. Consistent. Reliable. Calm. And the calmer he was, the more uneasy I felt. Because in my experience, calm was always temporary. It always meant something was coming. I started preparing for it without even realizing. Not in obvious ways. I didn't pick fights. I didn't accuse him of anything. I just detached a little. Held back just enough so it wouldn't hurt as much when things eventually fell apart. And then one night, I had a thought that didn't leave. What if I'm not the one who gets left this time? What if I'm the one who decides when it ends? That idea felt wrong. But it also felt safe. Because if I controlled the moment things broke, then I wouldn't be blindsided. I wouldn't be the one sitting there trying to understand what changed. I'd already know. Around that time, I started noticing Mark more at work. He wasn't part of our team. He was a real estate agent who worked closely with our company, always coming in to go over numbers, talk through deals, check documents. Confident. Easy to talk to. The kind of person who made conversations feel lighter without trying too hard. At first, it was nothing. Just passing comments. Small jokes when he'd stop by my desk. "Numbers treating you well today?" he asked once. I said, "They make more sense than people." He smiled and said, "That's a low bar." It stayed like that for a while. Until it didn't. One afternoon, he lingered longer than usual. We ended up talking about nothing important, just filling time. When he left, he said, "You should come out with us sometime. After work. It's not all spreadsheets and deadlines." I said, "I'm not really a group outing person." He shrugged. "Then don't come for the group." That stuck with me longer than it should have. I didn't act on it right away. But the idea was there. And the more my mind kept telling me something with Kevin was going to break, the more that idea started to feel like an option. Not because I wanted Mark, but because I wanted control. I told myself it wasn't even about cheating. It was about making sure I wouldn't be the one caught off guard when everything fell apart. That's how I justified it. And that's how it started. It didn't happen all at once. It started small. And that's what made it easy to ignore. It started with one message that didn't feel like a mistake. Mark stopped by my desk again the next day, leaned against the edge like he had nowhere else to be, and said, "So, are you always this serious, or is this a special occasion?" I said, "It's the job." He nodded. "That's not true. I've seen you laugh." I didn't remember that. He left a few minutes later, but not before saying, "I'll text you the next time we go out. You can ignore it if you want." I should have said no. Instead, I said, "Okay." That one word made everything easier after that. He got my number through a work contact list. I didn't question it. I didn't stop it. That was the first real decision I made. The first line I could have held. That night he texted. Nothing inappropriate. Just, "You survived today?" I stared at it longer than I needed to. It was harmless. That's what I told myself. I replied barely. And that's how it started. At first, it was nothing. Quick replies during breaks. Random comments about work. Small jokes that didn't mean anything. It felt separate from my relationship with Kevin. Like it existed in a different space where the rules didn't fully apply. Kevin and I were still good. That's the worst part. He still called me at the end of the day. Still asked how work was. Still showed up the same way he always had. One night, he brought takeout to my apartment without asking because he knew I had a long day. I remember opening the door and saying, "You didn't have to do that." He said, "I wanted to." Simple. No expectation. I hugged him a little longer than usual, and for a second, I felt something close to guilt. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it, but I knew who it was. Later that night, after Kevin left, I checked. "Mark, you disappeared." I typed back, "Busy." He replied, "Or avoiding me?" That should have been a red flag. Instead, it felt like attention. And attention felt like control. Because with Mark, I knew exactly what the dynamic was. There was no pretending. No guessing. No waiting for something to change. With Kevin, everything was calm. With Mark, everything was predictable in a different way. That's how I justified it. Days turned into weeks. The messages got longer. More personal. He started asking about my life. Not in a deep way, but enough to feel like he was paying attention. "Do you always overthink things?" he asked once. I said, "Only the important ones." He replied, "So I'm important?" I should have shut it down right there. Instead, I said, "Don't read into it." But I already had. I started looking for his messages. Checking my phone more than I should have. Responding faster than I meant to. It didn't feel like cheating. Not yet. That's what I kept telling myself. Kevin never noticed anything obvious. Or if he did, he didn't say it. He still trusted me. And the more he trusted me, the easier it became to keep things separate. One night, Kevin and I were sitting on his couch, his arm around me, TV playing something neither of us was really watching. He said, "You've been quiet lately." I said, "Just work stuff." He nodded. "If something's bothering you, you can tell me." I looked at him for a second too long. Because he meant it. And I still didn't say anything. Instead, I leaned into him and said, "I know." That moment should have stopped me. It didn't. A few days later, Mark texted me again. "Drinks tonight. Just us." I didn't reply right away. I stared at the message like it was a test I already knew I was going to fail. I thought about Kevin. About how he would never put me in this position. About how he had never given me a real reason to doubt him. And then I thought about how every relationship before him had ended. The same way. Without warning. Without control. I typed, "I can't." He replied, "That's not a no." I should have blocked him. Instead, I put my phone down and told myself I'd ignore it. I didn't. An hour later, I picked it back up and typed, "Just one drink." That's all it took. That night felt different from the start. The bar was dim, loud enough to feel private. Mark was already there when I walked in. He smiled like he knew something I hadn't admitted yet. You actually came, he said. I shrugged. I said one drink. He nodded. We'll see. We sat close. Too close. The conversation wasn't even that interesting. Work, random stories, things that didn't matter. But the energy did. That unspoken line sitting between us. I knew it was there. He knew it was there. Neither of us said it. At some point, he said, you don't seem like the type to do something you'd regret. I laughed a little and said, you don't know me that well. He leaned back slightly, studying me. I think I'm starting to. That should have been the moment I left. Instead, I stayed. One drink turned into two. Two turned into time I stopped tracking. At some point, he touched my hand. Not accidentally. Not in a way that could be ignored. And I didn't pull away. That was the real moment. Not the messages. Not the flirting. The choice to not stop it. Everything after that felt inevitable. We didn't rush it. That's what makes it worse. There was no sudden mistake, no moment I could blame on alcohol or confusion. It was slow. Deliberate. I knew exactly what I was doing the entire time. And I did it anyway. When I finally left, it was late. Too late. I sat in my car for a few minutes before driving, staring at the steering wheel like it could tell me what I had just done. My phone buzzed. Kevin. Did you get home safe? That message hit harder than anything that happened that night. Because it was normal. Because it was him being exactly who he had always been. I swallowed whatever was building in my chest and typed, yeah. Just got in. Miss you. I stared at the message after I sent it. And that's when it hit me. Not slowly. All at once. He wasn't cheating. He wasn't pulling away. He wasn't hiding anything. He was exactly who he said he was. And I had already crossed the line I was so afraid he would cross first. I sat there in silence, phone still in my hand, realizing something I couldn't undo. I didn't protect myself. I became the problem. And Kevin still had no idea. I thought the worst part would be getting caught. It wasn't. The worst part was waking up the next day and realizing nothing had changed for him. Kevin still texted me good morning like he always did. Still asked if I slept okay. Still told me he'd call me later. Like everything between us was exactly the same. And I sat there staring at my phone, feeling like I was living in something that looked normal but wasn't. I didn't reply right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how to act like nothing had happened. Eventually, I typed back, morning. I slept okay. That was the first lie of the day. There were a lot more after that. I told myself I could fix it by stopping. That if I just cut Mark off completely, whatever happened would stay contained. It wouldn't grow into something bigger. It wouldn't touch Kevin. So I texted Mark. This was a mistake. Don't text me again. He didn't reply immediately. Part of me expected him to push back. To try to pull me back in. That would have made it easier to blame him. Instead, he replied an hour later. All right. That was it. No argument. No pressure. And somehow that made it feel even more real. Because now there was nothing to distract me from what I had done. I blocked his number after that. Deleted the messages. Cleared everything I could. Like removing the evidence would make it smaller. It didn't. Because the problem wasn't what I did. It was the fact that I chose to do it. The next time I saw Kevin, I almost told him immediately. He came over that night with food again, like he always did when he thought I was stressed. He set everything down, looked at me for a second, and said, "You look tired." I said, "Work." He nodded like that made sense. We sat down to eat, and I couldn't focus on anything he was saying. Every word felt like it was hitting something already cracked. At one point, he reached across the table and said, "Hey, talk to me. You've been off lately." That was my moment. I could have said it. I could have told him everything right there, before it turned into something heavier. Instead, I said, "It's just been a lot this week." He held my gaze for a second longer than usual. Like he knew that wasn't the full truth. But he didn't push. "Okay," he said. "We'll get through it." That word hit harder than anything. Because I had already stepped outside of that without him knowing. After that, I tried to fix things in ways that didn't involve the truth. I became more attentive. Texted him first. Made plans. Showed up early. Remembered things before he could. It wasn't natural. It was compensation. And he noticed. Of course he did. A week later, we were at his apartment, sitting on the couch. He had his arm around me, but I could feel the distance anyway. Not from him. From me. He said, "You've been different." I kept my eyes on the TV. Different how? Like you're trying too hard. That caught me off guard. I said, "I don't know what you mean." He let out a small breath, not frustrated, just thinking. "You don't have to prove anything to me," he said. "You know that, right?" That almost broke me. Because that's exactly what I was doing. Proving something he never asked for. I nodded. I know. But I didn't stop. If anything, I leaned into it more. Because the alternative was sitting with the truth. And I wasn't ready for that. The problem is, guilt doesn't stay quiet. It shows up in small ways. In hesitation. In the way you avoid eye contact for half a second too long. In the way your voice shifts when certain topics come up. Kevin started noticing those things. He didn't accuse me of anything. He just watched more carefully. One night, we were walking back from dinner and he said, "Can I ask you something?" I said, "Yeah." He paused for a second before speaking. "Is there something you're not telling me?" My chest tightened immediately. I forced a neutral expression. "What do you mean?" He looked at me, not suspicious, just searching. "I don't know," he said. "It just feels like something's off, and I can't figure out what it is." There it was. Not an accusation. Just intuition. And somehow that made it harder to lie. Because he wasn't trying to catch me. He was trying to understand me. I could have told him then. Right there, in the middle of the sidewalk, under a streetlight that made everything feel too exposed. Instead, I said, "I'm just stressed." "I told you." He held my gaze for a few seconds. Then nodded slowly. "Okay." That word again. Not agreement. Not belief. Just acceptance. That's when I realized something I hadn't fully faced yet. He trusted me enough to believe what I said. Even when something didn't feel right to him. And I used that. That realization didn't make me confess. It made me quieter. More careful. Because now it wasn't just about what I did. It was about protecting the version of me he still believed in. Weeks passed. Nothing exploded. No confrontation. No discovery. Just this quiet, constant pressure sitting underneath everything. Kevin stayed the same. Kind. Consistent. Present. He didn't pull away. He didn't cheat. He didn't become the version of him I had already prepared for. And that made everything worse. Because there was no justification left. No reason to point to. No moment I could say, "That's why I did it." It was just me. One night, we were lying in bed, the room quiet except for the low hum of the city outside. He pulled me closer and said, "I'm glad we're okay." I felt my chest tighten. Because we weren't. Not really. But he didn't know that. So to him, we were. I stayed still for a second, then said, "Me too." Another lie. But softer. More dangerous. Because it sounded real. That's the part one didn't expect. How easy it would be to continue. How normal everything could look even after something was already broken. I thought the guilt would force a decision. It didn't. It just sat there. Waiting. And now I'm here. Nothing has blown up. Kevin still trusts me. Still looks at me like I'm exactly who he thinks I am. And I'm the only one who knows that's not true anymore. I keep going back and forth. Telling him would destroy something that, from his side, is still good. Not telling him means I keep living in something that isn't honest. And I don't know which one is worse. Part of me thinks I deserve to lose him. Part of me thinks telling him now would just be about making myself feel better. And part of me still tries to justify it. Saying I was protecting myself. That I needed control. That I did it before I could be hurt. But none of that changes what actually happened. He didn't betray me. He didn't give me a reason. He just showed up. And I broke something anyway. So now I'm stuck with this question that doesn't go away. Do I tell him the truth and risk losing everything for something he never did? Or do I keep it to myself and try to be better moving forward, knowing the foundation isn't real anymore? I don't know which one makes me worse. He's still loving the version of me that existed before that night, and I don't know if I deserve to let him keep believing she's real.